It's time that I share the story of how I learned to code and got into Microsoft, where I currently work as a software engineer in artificial intelligence and high performance compute. Now, this is a channel where I learn things and I share them with the mission of helping as many people as possible. And it has come to my attention that many of you want to learn how to code and want to land jobs in big tech. And since I have accomplished those goals myself, I wanted to share with you exactly what my journey looked like in hopes that it might help you do the same thing. So my personal journey starts with a little backstory. I was originally on the doctor path. I was going to be a neurosurgeon, and I did all of the initial things that you need to do to make that happen. So I got a bachelor's in biology, took the medical college admissions test, got into medical school, and went. I was in medical school for a little over 2 years, and all the while I was just absolutely hating it. I was like, I really don't want to do this, and I was really contemplating leaving, but I was just thinking, I don't know what else I would do. Now, my brother had done something similar and actually left law school in order to code, and he had told me, hey man, I think that you'd actually like this. And ultimately, that is exactly what I decided to do, and so here starts my coding journey. So I decide that I am going to go the bachelor's degree in computer science route. Now, as an aside, even though it worked out, I would not do it that way if I had it all to do again. In hindsight, I realized that I could have gotten the same result for way less money in way less time. So if you want me to make a video explaining exactly what I would do if I had this whole thing to do over again in order to learn to code and land at a big tech, I will definitely make that video, just let me know. But in this story, I go with the CS degree route. Now, at least the good news for me was that I already had a bachelor's. So instead of doing the dumb kind of required classes, I was able to just solely focus on computer science courses. So there's a program through Oregon State that offers a post-bac in computer science. And a huge plus is that it was completely online. So considering that, I was like, all right, I'll apply for that program. So this is like December of 2019 when I applied to Oregon State. I end up getting into the program and I'm set to start in March of 2020. In the meantime, I'm like, okay, I've never written a line of code, so let's start there. Well, that's not entirely true. I had written some code just to see if I liked it, but you get the point. So I picked up this textbook called Starting Out with C++ by Tony Gaddis. I just started working through it and learning all the basics. At the same time, I really went hard learning this subject called discrete math, because that was going to be one of the classes in my first term, and I heard it was an absolute killer. And then 1 month before I started the program, I also started learning about the cloud. So I took an AWS course centered around solutions architect content. Okay, so March hits and classes start rolling, and of course this is also 2020, so COVID hits at the exact same time. But thankfully, as I mentioned earlier, this program was completely online, so it actually didn't affect me that much. So now that I'm in the classes, I pretty much dropped my personal learning to code stuff, mainly the textbook that I was going through, and I dropped the discrete math learning I was going through because I was just using the courses in the program to learn this stuff instead. I did continue to learn cloud concepts, and then I also got pretty much obsessed with data structures and algorithms and technical interview prep, and so I started picking that up too. A couple months go by, I'm doing well in my classes, I'm getting better at technical interview questions. I passed the certification exam for the AWS Solutions Architect. I was TAing 2 classes, which were discrete math and Intro to Computer Science 2, and I had a few personal projects under my belt. One was like a machine learning project that also used the cloud, where the model would look at pictures of eyes and try to determine whether they were healthy or not. I also had a game that I built and then a school project that I beefed up. So things were going pretty well up to that point, and now September is rolling around. So I'll tell you a little bit about the plan that I had for myself at that time. So basically the bachelor's program was 60 credits and it was on the quarter system, so 4 quarters per year. And the absolute fastest that you could finish based on all the prereqs and stuff like that was 5 quarters. So that was my goal. I said I will finish this as fast as possible, unless I got an internship that I would really want, that I knew would likely feed me into a full-time role. But I wanted to be very selective about it and pretty much only take an internship if it was in big tech, because that is ultimately where I wanted to land. And I also knew that an internship would delay my graduation. I only thought that was worth it if it would allow me to break into big tech sooner. So at the end of September, I started blasting my resume out and I applied to quite a few internships, but the big 3 that I will talk about today are Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. So with Microsoft, they liked my resume and they reached out about doing a phone screen. So that was on a video coding platform. It was 30 minutes long, a couple behavioral questions, a coding question, and a wrap up. I did okay from a problem solving point of view, but definitely thought that I could have done better. So I don't hear back from them what seemed like pretty much forever. I pretty much just assumed that I bombed it and gave up on that one. Around the same time as the Microsoft phone screen, I did some online assessments for the other companies. So Amazon and Google each send me an online assessment, which are basically just coding questions. And I had been prepping for these types of questions, but I was by no means amazing at them yet. But the online ones aren't usually too bad, and by the grace of God, I got some questions that I was able to figure out, and so I pretty much nailed those. Then things progressed pretty quickly for Amazon. The online assessment went well, and so they reached out to schedule a final interview, which happened sometime in November. So I go to the interview. Well, I didn't go because this is still COVID, so all of them are online, which most companies actually have kept it that way and are still doing their interviews online, which I think is just way better. So I do the interview, and honestly, I got destroyed by the question. 2 days later, I get the dreaded rejection email saying I'm not getting the internship, and honestly, I was pretty devastated about that. I mean, it totally made sense because I did not do well in the coding question, but I was so looking forward to that opportunity, I just kind of had to watch my dream die. And on top of that, I hadn't heard back from Google or Microsoft since their original assessments, so I pretty much thought things were over and I wasn't getting a big tech internship. And then it happened. I get the email from Microsoft saying that they actually liked what I did on the phone screen and they want to schedule a final interview. I could not believe it. I was so freaking stoked. Here my dream was just rekindling before my eyes. Then about a week after that, I get the email from Google saying, hey, you crushed the online assessment. Let's get you in for a final interview. So I literally went from failing Amazon and my life is over to having 2 final interviews with the other top companies on my list. And actually the failing of the Amazon interview ended up being really amazing for me because it lit a fire under me in terms of interview prep. I realized I could not just be good at the questions, I had to be amazing at these interviews. And I had to try to take as much chance out of it as possible. So I scheduled both of them for January, a couple weeks apart, so that gave me about a month to prep for Microsoft and 6 weeks for Google. Then I started grinding like crazy for hours and hours every single day, and I used 3 main platforms for that. The first was AlgoExpert, which I highly recommend, and this one taught me how to do the interview problems because they just have the best solutions out there. And I had already done quite a few problems on that platform, even when I sat and failed the Amazon interview, but I just hadn't done enough. So I did more questions on AlgoExpert, and then I used LeetCode to get more volume. LeetCode is a site that's just a giant test bank of coding questions, like literally thousands. And I had the premium subscription so I could go through the tracks that had the most common Microsoft and Google questions, and just try to work on ones that were going to be specific to my interview. And I actually didn't do that many problems on LeetCode compared to what I've seen some other people do, but I did about 130-ish questions, and I dug really deep on the understanding of those questions. So I looked for patterns that connected them, and I noticed I was able to really use those patterns when I encountered other problems that maybe looked different on the surface, but really just boiled down to the same pattern that I had already seen. And then the third platform that I used was Pramp. Now Pramp is a site where other people are also studying for their technical interviews, and you get matched up with somebody to do a mock interview with each other. So you interview them for 30 minutes, and they interview you for 30 minutes. So I did 23 mock interviews on there, and that was extremely helpful and helped me get a cadence for how to deliver these interviews really well. So the communication, working through the entire problem, making sure that the interviewer was on the same page and knew where I was going, discussing different approaches to solving the problem, then picking the most optimal, explaining why that's the case. And to do that, I was using Big O notation. And then of course, coding up the implementation and live debugging. So I really honed all of those skills through Pramp, and I thought that that was invaluable. So then the Microsoft interview rolls around, and it's going to be 2 separate interviews with coding questions. And to do these interviews, we're supposed to use this coding platform called Codility. Now the recruiter tells me that the interview knows that, and that that's what they are going to be using for the interviews. So I hop on the first interview, and no one's there. Okay, whatever, that is pretty normal, so I wait. After about 5 minutes, I'm freaking out a bit, so I check the email where I scheduled all of this stuff, and I see that there's a backup Microsoft Teams link in case Codility isn't working. I say, okay, I'll jump on that too just in case. As soon as I do, I see my interviewer sitting there on the screen, on the Teams link, not the Codility link, and he looks at me and says, "Why are you late?" But I just kept calm, explained that I thought that I was supposed to use the Codility link for the interview, and apologized for my tardiness. And honestly, the interviewer was totally cool about it, and we just moved on, no problem. But it definitely gave my heart a rush in the beginning. So during the interview, he gives me a medium question. I solve it, then we do some behavioral stuff. He asks me to explain some other technical concepts. and overall we just had a really good time chatting. So that one actually went really well outside of the being late thing. So I go to the second interview, and this time I learned from my mistake, so I open up the Codility and the Teams platform at the same time. But this interviewer actually did use the Codility one, so that was great. So I'm doing the interview, he gives me a question, it's another medium, things are going fine, and then my Wi-Fi drops out. So obviously the call literally drops, but thank God I was able to dial in on my phone. But then I'm literally sitting there trying to code this question up on my phone, and if you've ever done that, you know how difficult it can be, especially when it's not how you prepped at all. But I kept rolling with it, and honestly my interviewer was pretty chill about it. And I actually could tell that he really liked that I was able to just stay composed and adapt on the fly. So despite two nearly horrible experiences, both interviews actually went pretty well overall. And just a few days later, I get the best email of my life. And they tell me, congratulations, you have been selected to intern here this summer. So that was literally 13 months after I had written my first line of code to landing into Microsoft. Yes, it was just an internship, but I was pretty sure that I would be able to convert to full-time after the fact, and that was the case. Quickly, I'll wrap up with what happened at Google as well, but that story is probably best for another video entirely. So for Google, I also passed the technical interview. So I had 3 rounds, one medium, one kind of medium-hard borderline, and a dreaded hard dynamic programming question. So quite intense, but by the grace of God, I was able to get all the optimal solutions for those, and I passed. Now Google has a final step in this process where you have passed the technical interviews, but you still need to match with the team. And that's the part that I fell short with and did not end up getting matched with the team. They said that I could do the matching process again for the fall internships, but this time I could skip all the technical interview portion, already passed that, and just skip straight to the matching process. But by this time, I was just kind of done with it all. I was a little burnt out, and I wanted to just graduate and move to full-time. So I decided not to go that route. I didn't even apply for the fall internships. And maybe I really should have, just to see what would have happened. But I love the team that I'm on at Microsoft. It has been an incredible experience so far, so I really have no complaints. Quick fast forward just for completion's sake. I did the internship in June 2021. I graduated the following term with my bachelor's, and started full-time at Microsoft in February of 2022. So that's pretty much my whole story and the route that I took, and I hope that it helps some of you on your personal journeys. I can definitely go into more details on any parts of the process as well, so just let me know if you want any of that. And if you got anything from the video, please drop it a like, subscribe to the channel. We'd love to have you in the family. And now it's time for me to serve as your reminder. Always put the work in, and from there, leave it in the hands of the one true king. Stay kingly.